Hello, Lynette here. Have you been paying attention to Brexit? Or did you decide that it was boring and complicated? Well, if you did, you're not alone. It is complicated, but it's not boring. It's kind of like an amazing computer game that's going on right in our backyard that we really should be paying attention to. So let me just touch on a few high points. England joined the EU in 1973. So this is not a super long-term, situation that they've been part of for centuries or some crazy thing like Europe can do. It's relatively new. In fact, the whole EU has been around since 1950. It was a post-war it was called the Economic Community at that time. And it was for steel and coal, for tariffs and trade, and these two major things that ran Europe. And they wanted to make it a smooth playing field, and it was a way to join up Europe together, and this is all good. But you see the difference between economic community and economic union. The EU now is a governmental body. They call themselves the EU government. I don't know when that happened, when in the last, 68, 70 years this changed, but it's a government now all to itself. It has a president, Jean-Claude Juncker, who is a bad guy of the first order. And then England took on, the euro came into being in 1999, and England said, no, you know what, we've got the pound sterling, and that's been with us for hundreds of years, and we're going to just stay with that, we're good. And the whole of Europe went crazy and said, you're going to just bomb, your trade's going to fail, basically England's going to blow up. And England said, yeah, whatever. Oh, we're good. We're good. You keep your currency. And nothing happened. It was all good. Now, same thing's happening with Brexit. The rest of Europe, those that are in the palm of the EU, are saying, oh my God, you can't just walk away because your trade is going to go in the toilet and everything's going to blow up. And what about Northern Ireland and Republic of Ireland? And we've got hard Brexit and soft Brexit. This is all terrible. Well, I think it's exactly the same thing as the euro. And lots of experts over there say the same thing. They have one man whose name is Jacob Rees-Mogg, and you should look him up. Go to YouTube, look him up. And here's some of his speeches. He's very interesting. He's very quiet, very self-effacing, and serious. He's kind of like the professor that you had in college that you really liked, but you couldn't actually say why because he was so dry, but you were fascinated with him. He's married with a couple of little kids, although he looks like he's in his late 40s maybe. And he is a staunch Brexiteer. And he is just saying flat out, Theresa May has failed our country, and she has to do what we voted on back in 2016. We voted to leave the EU. Since then, Theresa May, because she's a slimy piece of what, she has said, oh, I'm going to uphold the letter of the law. She inherited her prime ministership after the election because that prime minister said, I was against this, so I'm going to give up. They're very good about that kind of thing. I'm going to give this up, give it to Theresa May. And then she had a real live election back in last year, and she won that. Now, let's talk about the problems of being part of the EU. The EU says that you will take all immigrants at all times for any reasons if we say so. And that's what's going on now in Europe. And so Europe is being destroyed by third world immigrants. Literally. If you haven't fallen down that rabbit hole, do so, because you need to know what the globalist situation is, because America sits over here. We're on the edges of it. We're safe now with Donald Trump being president. He's keeping these Islamic invaders from our country, but it's a battle. And if we could have some of Europe with us, if we could have people leave the EU even, if we could have the EU go away and go back to nationalistic countries, this would be a great thing. And I know I'm rambling here, but this is really super important. So the vote is supposed to happen in March for the Brexit deal. And what she agreed to a day or two ago was basically that England was, oh yes, we're going to Brexit, but we're still going to pay you 38 billion euros, and we're still going to agree to your immigration terms, and we're still going to agree to your laws, and we're still going to agree to all of your trade laws and tariffs and this sort of economic structuring. In other words, they're not doing anything for Brexit. Only thing that they did was give up their voting rights in the EU. So they're taking on all of the laws and regulations of the EU without having any voting rights. It doesn't even make sense. Okay, so Jacob Rees-Mogg, who's kind of this spokesman for the pro-Brexit community, he's a member of parliament. He came out yesterday and gave a letter of no confidence to Theresa May, which is the British Parliament's way of saying, okay, here's a letter. You are on notice. I think you need to go. And they need a certain number, and I want to say it's 60 something, to make this where she has to walk away. And then the government can be turned over to somebody else. Somebody else, another Tory, another conservative, which is fine. You don't want to be a liberal. And there's lots of really qualified people in the parliament right now. There's at least 6, if not more, of people that are very talented and very staunch Brexiteers. Jacob Rees-Mogg is, as far as I'm concerned, he's the guy, but he says, no, I'm not putting my name forward. It doesn't mean somebody else couldn't put a name forward for him. So it's like this fascinating story unfolding of major things. If England could leave the EU, they could take back their borders. And they could even go so far as deporting people. But as it stands now, in all of these negotiations for the past month or more, they don't even mention the word immigration. Because as soon as somebody does that in England, the EU starts screaming, racist, Islamophobe, just to high heaven, just like they do here. And so they can't talk about that. But if you look at pictures of what London's like and some of these villages and towns that have been taken over by the Islamic invaders, it is horrifying. Even if you're not a great big fan of England and you don't think too much about it, I think you would see that it's a horrifying picture of what has happened. And this, of course, has happened all across Europe. If England can be strong and they can truly leave the EU and say, we're done, all your regulations, all your stuff, we are done, then it will give strength to countries like Poland and Hungary and Italy, who are right now giving the middle finger to the EU, saying, you know, we're not leaving the EU, but you can just take your regulations and your immigration rules and just stuff them because we are doing what's best for our country. And therefore, their countries are really safe and really nice. I have a cooking show on DVD that is these 2 women. The show's about 20 years old, okay? And they go all over England and they go into these little tiny villages and they talk to the shop owners and whatnot. And in one show, they go into a butcher shop that I guess is kind of famous in the area. And they say, well, how come you don't have all those beautiful hanging sides of meat in your window? And the owner says, oh, we can't do that. The EU said, Brussels told us that we couldn't do that anymore. And then another show, it's a business that does kippers, smokes kippers, which is fish. And this family-owned business has been around for over 100 years. And the ladies say, oh, this is so amazing. Can you send to the rest of Europe? And he says, no, we used to, but we can't anymore because the EU told us that we couldn't. So this is the kind of thing, the regulations that have just strangled business in England, all over Europe. And the regulation book is literally like that big. It's just like a Bible. And all decided on by politicians in Brussels that a lot of people call communistic, that they want people to toe the line, they want people to do what they say, and they want to have it all. Their latest thing is they've been working on really strongly is a European army. And if that doesn't strike fear in your heart, you haven't read enough vintage science fiction to know that that is seriously bad for the US. There is a man who's very high up in the EU government. His name was Guy Verhofstadt, something like that. And he wanted to make sure that they get an army to protect Europe against China and Russia and America. Now, what? Macron stood just last week when Donald Trump was in England or in France for the First World War Memorial, and he basically told the world that Donald Trump and his nationalism were evil and harmful. It was okay to be patriotic, but nationalistic, where you made your country be first and your people's beliefs and values and traditions be promulgated, that's a bad thing. He stood in front of the world and said, that's evil, evil. Macron is a bad guy too. So here's a whole bunch of stuff for you to think about. And I hope you look into it because it's very, very interesting. Thanks for watching. Bye-bye.